morning, Kahal Kadosh. Beruchim Aba'im to everybody. Today, Friday, corresponding to the 19th day of Shabbat, the 21st day of January, Erev Shabbat Kodesh Parashat Yitro Makam Husseini. Today's class graciously sponsored by Mr. Edwin Aripol and family, the Ilun Nishmat, his beloved grandfather, David Aripol ben Rivka. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by Ivor and Robin Braca, the Ilun Nishmat, Mrs. Braca's mother, Marinelle Masha Bat Blanche Alea Shalom. Additionally, today, breakfast and class graciously dedicated by Mr. Charles Jamal and family in honor of the Refuah Shelema of our dear friend, Mr. Charlie Saka Yeshaya ben Lora. Hashem should give him a Refuah Shelema among the Cholim of all of Am Israel. Amen. Today's class also sponsored by Michael and Jamie ben Melech, Le'ilun Nishmat, his beloved mother, Devora Faige, Bat Shmuel. Additionally, today's class dedicated to Le'ilun Nishmat, Sally Serena Bat Reina, by her dear family as well. Also today's class dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Yosefa Bat Golda. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by ABJ Franco and family for the Refuah Shelema of Yosef ben Barbara, Rahel Bat Eileen, and Refuah Shelema for Yosef Simcha ben Sara Hana and Ishaq ben Miriam, Mr. Ike Hillary, among all of the Cholim of Am Israel. Amen. We say thank you and Tizkela Mizvot to all the sponsors of the class throughout the week, as well as the breakfast for the Refuah Shelema of Yeshaya ben Lora. With all that being said, I think that it is appropriate to continue for a few minutes the topics that we started to learn for the past 3 or 4 days, which are the suggestions given by Rabbi Chaim Palachi on the time of the Shobabim, the special period in the Jewish calendar that we have in order to bring Kedusha and Tahara to our lives. So one of the things that we learned yesterday that I like to somehow connect it to the Parashat of today. So on step 31 he says, Lasim Shalom ben Adam leChavero uben ish leishto. The one of the tikkunim, one of the spiritual repairs that a person can invest upon for this particular time of the year is to enhance and to increase harmony, if it's at home or if it's between friends. Now, the next one he says, which I believe they are connected, ledaber sanegoria tamid. Always speak in a pleasant, in a positive way. Interesting enough, in this week's Parashat Yitro, we already know the highlight of Parashat Yitro. Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, that was, as the Parashat tells us very clearly in the beginning of the portion, discusses the concept of who Yitro was. And we know who Yitro was. Yitro was the priest of Midian. Yitro was someone who, according to our commentaries in the Parashat, he did and followed every imaginable type of belief that in that generation the world had. All kinds of beliefs, all kinds of idols, all kinds of gods, so to speak. But interesting enough, Yitro also is the first person in the world who says Baruch Hashem. It's a pasuk. Baruch Hamonai. Baruch Hashem comes from Yitro. Yitro says Ata Yadati. Now I know that the God of the Jewish people is the real deal. And then the Torah gives the zechut to Yitro of having the parasha of the 10 commandments. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have a parasha under his name. The Torah is under the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk says, Zichru Torah Moshe Abdi. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, so to speak. But Yitro had the merit of having a parasha. And the question is, why? Short answer, exactly what Rabbi Chaim Palachi wrote 3,000 years later. לדבר סנגוריה תמיד. Remember when I explained what that means? Yesterday I explained it at length. Now I gave you the very short version. Always speak in a good, in a positive way. What happened with Yitro? How did Yitro arrive to the place of Midian? So we know the answer. Yitro was actually a fugitive. Why? He was one of the three advisors of Paro. The other two were Bilam and Iyov. So when Paro confronts them with an advice what to do about the Jewish people, Bilam says, get rid of them. Iyov remains silent. Yitro says, how can you get rid of them? They helped you. They helped Egypt to flourish. They made Paro the biggest landlord of the world. You think people today own lands and fields? Paro owned an entire country. All the deeds of the mortgages were with Paro. Because people, thanks to Yosef Hasadik. So Yitro, he's telling Paro, he's giving musar to Paro. And he says, you're an ingrate. Guess what? They didn't like it. They wanted to get rid of him. What did Yitro do? He ran away. He ran away, and eventually, as we learned in the past, he takes with him the staff all the way from Adam Arishon that Paro had, and that was the staff that Moshe Rabbeinu later on utilized in order to activate the Makot and the splitting of the Red Sea. But I think that there is a bigger lesson even with Yitro. The Pasuk begins in the Parashat of today by Shema Yitro. Yitro heard. I ask you a simple question. Was Yitro the only person in the world that heard of the splitting of the Red Sea and the war against Amalek? Every citizen of the world heard and saw the miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea. Because according to our holy books, the splitting of the Red Sea, it wasn't limited only to Egypt, to the splitting of the Red Sea. It actually, every single water in the world split in half that day. So you were in Miami. I'm not sure if Miami existed then. Maybe it did, I don't know. America was discovered, according to history books, 1492, right? But must be something that happened before that. If it was discovered, it means it has been there. So I don't know what happened there. But even talk about the vicinity. Everybody saw these miracles. But Yitro did something that no one else did. He paid attention. He listened and he acted upon. It's not pashut. How many times we hear things? Oh, very nice speech. Too long. Too short. Not inspiring. Heke. All kinds of nice words. A rabbi called me the other day. He says, Rabbi, I have a problem. He says, my committee has a complaint against me. That's what this rabbi said. From a different shul. So what's the complaint? He says, one complaint that he speaks too deep, too lofty. I said, okay. If you will be the opposite, I worry. But if you're able to tone it down a bit and speak in a way that people can relate, Hazako Baruch. Yitro reacted. Yitro reacted. How many times we hear things and we say, oh, Hazib, Haran, Refuah Shelema, he was such a nice fellow. But what reaction do we have? I don't want to say the word none, but most of the time, it goes in one ear and leaves the other. In the case of Yitro, he didn't leave Yitro. He went inside and stayed. And remember the Gemara that we learned the other day? It talks about the ear. The ear is the easiest way to penetrate into the human body. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, let me see if I'll find it here. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. I should have it here in front of me. Right here. אל ישמיע אדם לאוזניו דברים בטלים מפני שמכבוד תחילה לאיברים. It says Rashi, the easiest way. So you listen, you can ignore it, or you can do something about it. That's exactly what Yitro did. Yitro acted, and we know the zechut of Yitro, not only that he became the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. Can you imagine you're Moshe Rabbeinu, and you ask Moshe, who is your father-in-law? Oh, my father-in-law is the Pope. That's what Kohen Midian was. We call it the Pope because it's more of a position in the church. But Kohen Midian, that's what it means. The priest of Midian. So Moshe Rabbeinu could have said no, and somebody from out of town. But Moshe was proud of his father-in-law. Because now we're dealing with two extremes. Moshe Rabbeinu, holy, Isha Elohim, the Torah calls him, a godly man, right? And Yitro, all the way. But as the Rambam writes in the laws of Teshuvah, that maybe the person, for a certain period of time, he or she can be a bit distant from Hashem, but the moment that a person seeks the truth and starts activating and gets closer to Borei Olam, guess what? The person can develop a great relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this was the great zechut of Yitro. And that's why Yitro has the Aseret HaDiberot. And we learned during Hanukkah, if you remember, that Aseret HaDiberot, even though they are related to the 10 Commandments, but Aseret HaDiberot not only is the foundation of the Torah, but it's actually a code, so to speak, for every single mitzvah of the Torah, including the 7 mitzvot of Chachamim. If you count the letters in the 10 Commandments, you should come up to the number 620. Every letter connects to one mitzvah from the Torah. The final 7 letters, which are Asher Lere'echa, your relationship with your fellow man, that's part of the Rabbi Chaim Palachi message, Ledaber Besanegoriat Tamil, to speak about things or others in a positive way, is connecting to the 7 mitzvot established by our Chachamim. But I'd like to connect this statement of the great Moed Kol Hai with the final pasuk of this week's parasha. So this week's parasha has many powerful messages besides the 10 Commandments. One of them is the famous pasuk that the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot quotes, that when a person is learning Torah by themselves, nevertheless, even though the Mishnah gives us 10 people, 5 people, or 3 people, and 2 people, the Mishnah also speaks about the merit of one person. And the source of that blessing also comes from this week's Torah portion. As the pasuk says, "Bechol hamakom asher azkir et shemi abo elecha uberachticha." Any place the Torah says that my name is called, I'll be there. In other words, call Hashem and He answers. Beautiful. But now the Torah discusses an interesting mitzvah. The mitzvah of building the Mizbeach. Although the Mizbeach, the altar, will be given many more details later on, as we're getting ready after Parashat Mishpatim, we have Yerumah, Tesaveh, Tisa, Vayakhel, Puede, and these are 5 major parashiot that deals with the Melechet HaMishkan, the building of the tabernacle, and the Kohen Gadol, and the different vessels of the Bet HaMikdash, or the Mishkan, the way it was called in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Mishkan means the Mishkan mobile, that was mobilized and moved every time the Jewish people needed to travel. Bet HaMikdash, very similar to the Mishkan, with one exception, that you have a fixed address. Once the Bet HaMikdash was built, that's where the Kedusha and the kelim and everything else took place. But temporarily, the Mizbeach and the altar, the altar which is Mizbeach, but the Mishkan was a Mishkan mobile. But in the Mizbeach, interesting enough, the Torah tells us two things. Number one, don't build the Mizbeach with metal. Why? Because metal is an agent to shorten the life of the person. Ki harbecha henafta aleha batehaleleha. This is one of the reasons why during the weekday, when we do Hamosi and Birkat Hamazon, everybody knows the halakha. What are we supposed to do? You're supposed to remove the knives. Why? The Gemara writes, Shulchan Domeh LaMizbeach. The table of a Jew is equal to the altar in the Bet HaMikdash. According to most opinions, Shabbat and Yom Tov, there is no need, but during the weekday there is a need. But that's not what I wanted to say. This was a freebie. What I wanted to say was the next one. Belo ta'aleh. Let's read together the pasuk. Belo ta'aleh b'ma'alot al mizbehi. Don't climb up the steps to go on the mizbeach. What does it mean? If you ever look in the Chumash that has the pictures of the mizbeach, you see that there was a ramp to go to the mizbeach, like in an angle, right? You started from the ground floor to the bottom, and then gradually a ramp. Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lehol. ADA, that's American Disabilities Act, require that places need to have ramps. For example, here we have a ramp, mandatory building code. If you go outside of the main door, make a right, you'll see the ramp. If somebody comes with a wheelchair, etc., they will be able to access the building. Airports, office buildings, schools, and even I saw in a shul not long ago that even the teva had a ramp. So if there is somebody, Hazve Shalom, that cannot climb the steps or is in a wheelchair, can do it through the ramp, etc. So this comes from actually this particular parasha. Don't build steps when it comes to the Mizbeach. Asher lo tigale el batecha alav. So your nakedness will not be seen by the steps. What does it mean? So we have to remember who was the one walking on this ramp. Who walked on the ramp? Kohanim. So when you go on a step, you make a certain move that your legs, you climb up and down, up and down, up and down. That's why some people may have an easy time to go down instead of going up. And some people may have an easy time to walk flat than going up the steps. Now why? Because going up requires a certain type of physical movement. But let's clarify. The message of the Torah had nothing to do with the possibility of a person not being able, or a Kohen not being able to climb the steps. The protection of the Torah was feeling the embarrassment of the steps. Now, I ask you a question. Imagine yourself, you go to your apartment on Shabbat today, you use the service staircase, and you look, you say, I don't like your paint color. Will you do that? Of course not. What happens if somebody says that to the floor? I don't like your color. Or you talk to the steps, why are you so high? Why you need to be 8 inches by code? Can't you be 7 inches? There are halachot of steps as well in the building code. So the Torah says, and I'm going to read the Rashi. Let's clarify. What was the uniform of the Kohanim?
A robe.
No, besides robe. 4 garments, right? So he had some type of pants, niknasaim, right? Besides the hat or whatever thing else. Nevertheless, mikol makom, Rashi says, archabat hapesiot, when a person widened their legs to climb up, קרוב לגילוי ערווהו. Borderline, maybe a movement can expose your private parts. And now, who is looking at your private parts? The stairs. So what? You're not naked in the bathroom when you take a shower? Maybe you're a Sadiq, maybe you put curtains around. Okay, but let's be honest. What happens if you have a glass partition in your shower? Will they become dark automatic? Which, by the way, it does exist, right? So comes Rashi and it says, Be'ata noheg bam minhag bizayon. You are mistreating the steps by exposing yourself in an unnecessary manner. And let's clarify. Obviously, in the bathroom, in the shower, that's the way things are. But outside of your private moments in the bathroom or the shower, Rashi says, Behadevarim kal va'omer, uba abanim halalu. If the stones, which are the material of the steps, she'en bahem da'at, they don't have a brain, lehakpid al bizyonam, to make it, to feel insulted by your lack of sensitivity to them. I repeat the example. You look at the step and you say to the step, I don't like your color, paint. I don't like the tile that it's on you. Are you ever going to do that? No. What will happen if you say that to the step? Gurnish. Nothing. Why? It says, En bahem da'at. They're not humans to have sensitivity, but yet they're inanimate objects. Amra Torah, nevertheless the Torah says, Ho'il beyesh bahem sorech, since there is a need, and by the way, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero said the similar concept sourcing from this parasha about the garments. About the garments, that how careful the person must be with the garments. Because the garments protect your body. They make you look good. And even if you don't look good, Hazvi Shalom, okay, I'm Avdil, okay? But what? They protect you in the cold, in the winter, in the summer. They give you some type of a self-kavod and derecheres. Amra Torah, the Torah says, Ho'il, since there is a need for you, lo tinhag bahem minhag bizayon, don't mistreat them, don't act towards them in a belittling manner. And here is the Hidush. Haverecha, your friend. Now we're moving from an inanimate object, which as we learn in Tu Bishvat, is the lowest level of creation, is objects which are inanimate. Meaning to say, nothing. You're going to tell the chair, you need a suntan. Or the fabric needs replacement. If you ever tell me that, I will make a mishaberach on the spot for you. If you tell me that, I'll make a mishaberach for you. And we don't sell one chair at a time. We do 50 at a time. All right? So, habercha, your friend, which includes the wife, obviously, and any other human being, shehu bidmut yosrecha, that was created in the godly image, umakpid al bizyono, and a human has feelings and emotions and reactions, ala had kama v'kama, how much the person must be sensitive towards others. Remember the story I told you about the guy yesterday that says, Rabbi, I'm emet. So I tell my wife whatever I want to say. And what did I say to him? You may be emet, but you're killing your spouse. So it says, Rabbi Chaim Palachi, one of the tikkunim of the Shovavim is ledaber sanegoria tamid. Always positive. Always sanegor and not kategor. Sanegor means a malach created to vouch for us. An advocate. that helps you, that protects you, that represents you. That's a malach called sanegor. Haz v'shalom. Across, you have the kategor. Kategor comes from Lashon kitrug. You ever heard of this word? Kitrug means accusation. One of the Yehirasones of the night of Rosh Hashanah talks about mekatreim. Says that one of the foods that we eat is to quiet down any heavenly accusation that can exist against us. The more we speak in a positive way, not only when you talk about people, which you shouldn't, according to the Hafetz Chaim, the less we do that, the better, but even on a personal matter, even if it's at home, believe me, it helps for the Shekhinah and it helps the Shalom to remain at home. Another one, he says, Lismoach besimcha shel mitzvah. He quotes the Hidah HaKadosh. The Hidah HaKadosh, as we know, was a great Sephardic giant. I read the other day that he was one of the students of the great Pituhei Hotam, Rabbi Yaakov Abu Hasir, if I understood correctly, was one of his great and known students. And the Hidah HaKadosh writes also, and this is brought down in many books of halachot, the Menachem speaks about it at length as well, talks about happiness. And we know David HaMelech's chapter of Tehillim 100 that says, Ibdu et Hashem besimcha. Everybody knows this pasuk. But also he says that whenever the person has an opportunity to do a mitzvah, to be happy. And especially if the mitzvah is unexpected and you never planned to do this mitzvah, and suddenly this mitzvah came your way, as the Gemara writes, mitzvah sheba'a leyadecha al tahmisenna. What does it mean? It says a mitzvah that came to you unexpectedly. Don't let it to become hames. Yani, don't delay it, don't procrastinate. Just do it the way the commercial says, right? Nike. Anyway, Nike, they took it from whom? From us. Any slogan that you see, it's most likely there is a Torah source. You just need to find it. And it says that this concept is not limited only whenever a mitzvah comes unexpectedly, but this is a fact that a person is able to do a mitzvah. That should be enough reason for a person to be happy. And we know what Shlomo HaMelech says, "B'shibachti ani et hasimcha." I praise happiness. I think Rashi explains that whenever the person is happy doing something, you will do it good, you will do it quickly, and you will put your heart and soul to a certain extent. On the other hand, the Ben Ish Hai explains in the mitzvah of Simcha of Yom Tov. The Ben Ish Hai says the following, that when a person does a mitzvah, there are many parameters, or there are many matters rather, that need to be determined on when it comes to the performance of the mitzvah. There is an evaluation for the mitzvah. How did you do the mitzvah, etc. But there is one aspect that Shamayim, according to the Ben Ish Hai and others, pays a lot of attention to, and it's how the mitzvah was done. If the mitzvah was done happily, you get double bonus. Not only you get the bonus or the reward, the sechar, so to speak, for the actual performance of the mitzvah, but the moment that you did it with happiness, that gives you a booster on the mitzvah. I don't mean a booster shot, I mean, right, today you gotta be careful the words that you say. I don't want to get into complicated fields, etc. But you get a booster on the performance of the mitzvah. So there is mitzvah done basic, can be coach, so to speak, or mitzvah can be premium economy, or mitzvah can be first class, or mitzvah can be business class. And that's what Rabbi Chaim Balachi says concerning the concept of be happy in the mitzvah. Another concept that he says, interesting, very deep concept, which I believe that I spoke about this maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and is about the concept of looking inside of the letters of the Sefer, that we already discussed that, and he quotes a very interesting Gemara. There is a Gemara that gives us three statements. One positive, one negative, and one middle of the road. The good one is a person that wants to purify himself. What does it mean? A person, in plain English, a person that wants to get closer to Hashem. Doesn't matter male or female, okay? The Gemara says, "Mesayein oto min hashamayim." Yani, we help you. We give you a GPS that's going to take you to the synagogue. Not Haz v'Shalom, the opposite. That's the meaning of Havali Taher. A person who is coming to become purified, Shamayim says, no problem. Put an Uber. Don't you need to put your direction, your address where you're going with Uber, and they give you a price? Okay, where to? So where to? Synagogue. Synagogue. Faddal. We'll take care of you. Habali Tameh. Haz v'Shalom. A person that instead of getting closer to Hashem, wants to do the opposite. Habali Tameh. A person who wants to become impure. The first one was Tahara, purity, holiness, godliness. The second one, Tum'ah. Tum'ah is the opposite of Kedusha, right? Pothin lo. The doors are open. You have a freedom of choice. Whatever decision you make, you deal with the consequences. Bottom line. That's the third one is, בדרך שאדם רוצה ללכת, מוליכין אותו, חזק וברור. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God the camera responded in one way. By the way, occasionally I get comments after the class, and he said, Rabbi, who is the fellow that whenever you talk, always finishes your pesukim? True story, by the way. And who is the fellow who wants to jump into the live recording and ask his questions? Doesn't he understand to wait? He said, no, maybe I have to say it in Spanish. But anyways, or in English. But in a more serious note, we're getting a lot of good feedback, Baruch Hashem. And this is your zechut, because your presence inspires me. I do some classes without audience. It's not the same. I do Spanish class without a live audience.
Of course, but you need us.
Of course I need you. You remind me of the song. I need you, every day I do. By the way, it's a kosher song by Abraham Fried. You heard of Abraham Fried, the singer? No Farid. No, somebody else is Farid. No, Fried. Nice, he speaks about how Hashem's presence is required for a godly connection. You can't say, I'm connected with God through my heart. That is important, but also the action is important. But let's continue. It's not a concert today. So the third statement says, but there in the pathway, in the roadway that a person wants to go, molichin oto. The Shamayim will trace your way. So it says Rabbi Chaim Palachi that aliyah to the Torah, it helps to lift the soul of the person alive. I don't mean Elui Neshama Haz v'Shalom. It elevates the soul, means it gives the Neshama an extra added boost. Boost, they call it? No, boost? Boost, B-O-O-S-T, correct? Mm-hmm. A boost, okay. A boost of energy of the Neshama. Yani, I got this aliyah, I'm so happy. Okay? Another one he says, Leistakel bifnim. Remember what we learned the other day in the laws of Maria Ketab? Showing the Sefer when you do Petiha, you open the Sefer, you do the Jilyan, right? When you leave the Hechal, you carry it open. And what do we say we need to do? Look for a letter that begins with the first letter of your first name. It says not only that, it says that it talks about the varieties in the aliyot. Just a disclaimer. Every aliyah of the Sefer, it has Kedusha. From Kohen to maftir. Every one of them have a different level of kedusha. And as we mentioned the other day, each one is connected to Abraham, Ishaq, Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, Yosef, and David. And it says, Aliyat Sefer Torah Shishi, if you have the opportunity of going up to the Sefer, the sixth Aliyah, hu yesod tikun lazeh. It helps spiritually for a person who wants to repair this shortcoming of the topic of the Shovavim. Also, it says, when it comes to Parashat Mesorah, in our tradition, I remember from childhood, that in Argentina, for example, and many congregations do it here as well, they don't say Parashat Mesorah. We say Parashat Tahor. That's how I grew up, Parashat Tahor. Although we discovered through the years that there are certain discrepancies in different traditions, including from Halab, etc. For example, in Argentina, many synagogues, when it comes to Parashat Korah, they don't read Parashat Korah by itself. Right? Is that accurate? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Korah Hukat. And there are reasons why certain parashiot carry, or even the way the Aliyah cuts is different in the Syrian tradition than many other congregations. But he says as follows, in Seder Taharot, yani Parashat Mesorah, it says that parasha, although talks about purification for leprosy, God forbid, that's the title of that parasha. Nevertheless, it says that tahara, physical purification, it helps for any avon. Meaning to say, today we don't have leprosy, Baruch Hashem. The Hafetz Chaim, I believe he quotes the Zohar Kadosh that says that we don't have leprosy in our days. Because if God forbid, Haz v'shalom, a person will be afflicted by this condition, which as the Rambam writes, it wasn't a physical illness, although it had a physical manifestation of that condition on the skin, but it was a godly message to the person. That's how the Rambam discusses in the laws of Tahara of Mesorah. That's what he writes. It says, it's not davar pashut. You know, sometimes some medical, physical conditions, we understand them. This happened, that happened, that's the outcome. But Sara'at, you know, and it didn't go straight to the body. If you remember the step-by-step Perashiot Tazliach Tahor, first starts on the walls, right? Then goes on the vessels, on the garments, and eventually on the skin, God forbid. So Hashem sends the message, is that first you get a message, a text message, then you get a WhatsApp, then you get an email, then you get a subpoena. Amavdil ben Kodesh lehol. Different levels. You can ignore the text, doesn't matter. You can ignore a WhatsApp. Used to be a time that you know if the person read it or not, right? If it has two blue things. Then email, maybe they open it or not. Nowadays, there is an opening email replies that they let you know if the email was open or not. Okay? That's technology today. Okay? And each one has a different reaction. But if God forbid, Haz v'shalom, a person receives a subpoena, what's going to be your reaction? You're going to react. Hamavdil ben Kodesh lehol. That's exactly what it was. So it says, the Beseder Tahara, it says when you come to that Perashah, it says a person gets an aliyah, it says that the zechut of reading about the topic of purification, it brings purification to the neshama of the person for the shortcomings of family purity and personal holiness. He brings additional concepts. One of them is the importance of Perashah with Targum. We know the Gemara writes, Hayav Adam le'ashlim perashiyotav im hatzibur, shenai mikra be'achat Targum. There is a concept in the halakha, the reading of Parashat with Targum. Read the Humash and the translation in Aramaic. And I was happy to see not long ago a response describing what happens if a person doesn't understand. It will take you maybe a day to read the whole thing. So there are formulas given how to circumvent that. One of them is reading the actual translation of the Parashat. Because what's the whole idea of reading Parashat with Targum? Not only to follow to be on the same track as the Sibur, as the Kahal, okay, that gives longevity to the person, the Gemara says. You follow the Kahal, you connect it to the Kahal, that brings long life to the person. Why? Because you are connected to Kedusha. We discussed this, the Gemara says, "Le'olam al-yotzi adam et atzmo min ha-kelal." We gave this class maybe a month and a half ago, discussing the importance of being connected to the community. The more we connected to the community, we grow together, we move together, we function together, we survive together. But if a person says, "Shalom alech nafshi," me, myself, and I don't care, I don't need, etc. No, you need. You can't be isolated. You can't be isolated. You need to be connected. So it says here that when we fulfill this halakha of reading the Parashat parallel to when the Sibur reads it for that weekend, that alone, it brings Parashat to the person. Today's Parashat, Parashat Yitro, is a very short Parashat. It's a bit Av Pesukim. Yes. 76, right?
72.
72. Ain Bet. No Ain Vav. Ain Bet. Okay. Av. Shem Av. So Shem Av, since he speaks in codes, my duty is to explain. Okay? Shem Av is one of the holiest names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There are different names in Hashem's repertoire of names. One is Yod Ke Vav Ke, Amonai 65, Shakai 314, Shalom 376, etc. So you have smaller names, Ban, Sag, Ma, Ab. I can't talk too much, otherwise all the secrets are going to come out. So there is one called Shem Ab, 72 value letter of Hashem's name, which is the same gematria of the word Hesed. Olam Hesed Ibane. The world is built on the pillar of kindness. And Hesed is the same numerical value as the number 72, which is the amount of verses that Parashat Yitro contains. So this is a good week to start familiarizing ourselves with the text of the Parashat. I'm sure that for many, maybe very practical and easy, read Parashat with Targum, but for many of us, maybe too difficult, especially if we read slow Hebrew. But definitely, get the ArtScroll Chumash. You have English, Spanish, good Chumashim are out there that gives you beautiful explanation when the Shabbat Kodesh comes tonight and tomorrow. Not only you're going to be familiar with the Parashat, because many times people read the Sephirah and they don't understand what's flying. Okay? So therefore, the Gemara gives this particular halachot, and it says, make the effort of reading the Parashat before Shabbat. Train yourself, it says, interesting enough, to give also some tzedakah in honor of Shabbat Kodesh. This is something that we learned a few weeks ago, that when the husband sets up the candles for the wife in honor of Shabbat, right? That's how the husband becomes a partner with his wife on the candle lighting Shabbat, Friday afternoon. What does it say? Also put some tzedakah, so the wife and you can put tzedakah. I do this every week. I'm in charge of setting up the candles, hot water, lights which are necessary, which are not necessary, air conditioning, putting tzedakah on the next to the candles for my wife and I, or whichever family member happens to be at home for Shabbat. And this is some of my to-do list.
Flowers.
Flowers for sure. Sure. My wife loves it when I buy flowers. She says, I have very good taste. I said, of course, I marry you. You like that?
MashaAllah.
That was better than the flowers. You agree?
100%.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, he gives more tikkunim. I like to say one more. And this is powerful because it's not a new topic. We learned this concept last week in one of the classes of the Hokle Israel. But this happens to be clone to a certain extent, and it says one sentence that has 10 lines. Izaher mi berit halashon. Be careful the way you speak. And we explained back then the relationship between the speech and the berit milah. Both of them are in the front part of the human body, correct? Facing the front. Every opening of the body is towards the front, with one exception that we're not going to discuss today. No need. No need. And there is a reason why Hashem made the body that way. Maybe some other time we'll discuss it. But we discuss that the area between the legs of the person in the men's department, it's called a milah, which is also circumcision. That's the tool. The milah is the circumcision. But in Hebrew, what is the meaning of the word milah?
Word.
Word. So in Hebrew, the word, it's called milah. Same thing as the milah. Hiddush, right? Something new, right?
Millah.
Okay, now, so it says Izaher, Berit Halashon. Why he uses the word Berit? Izaher me Halashon. It says the Berit of the Lashon has an ashpa'a on the Berit Milah. Berit Milah, the covenant of your words, Berit Milah, is a clone. If this part of the body is protected, I'm not even talking about kosher food. I'm sure everybody eats kosher food inside their home, outside of the home. So we can skip that speech for today. Okay? But remember when we were learning during the weeks of the Omer, the Sephirot, the fine print under each number of the Omer, it carries a message. So we discussed the final week of the Omer, we discussed something called the Sephirah of Malhot, the kingdom of Hashem revealed in the world. But we also learned how these Sephirot, the attributes of Hashem, are connected to the human body as well. The area between the legs of the person, it's called Yesod, the foundation of holiness. That's why that part of the body is connected to Yosef. Yosef HaSadik. He was the champion of holiness. The next part of the body, it's called the mouth of the person. And how this is connected, to which Sephirah is this connected to? Malhut, kingdom. You are the king through your mouth. If you control it, you are the king. If you don't control it, you become the slave. Follow? As we learned once, I think it's quoted in the name by Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim, don't be afraid of the title, was written actually by a great rabbi. I think his name was Rabbi Yehuda Hasid. He wasn't Hasidic because he was from Germany. And Germany, they barely had Hasidim. They had what they call Yekel, they call them, okay? But in a different note, this book is a universal book of proper conduct. Piety. You want to develop piety? Read this book. Some things are obvious, some things are hidushim. And one of the things that he writes there says as follows: as long as the words are inside of me, I'm in control of the situation. I'm the king of my silence. Once the words left my body, I become the slave of the words. Yani, how many times we speak before we think? And then the person listening got offended and insulted, and you say, I didn't mean to say that, but it came out the wrong way.
It's too late.
Hazako Baruch.
Thank you.
Hazako Baruch. Okay? So that's why it says, Izaher, be careful the way you talk, כדי שלא ייכשל בברית המאור. It says, if you handle this part of the body, these two, okay, you create a positive reaction to protect the parallel part of the body, which is the Berit Milah. As David HaMelech says in the book of Tehillim, Amarti, David says, Eshmera derachai mechato bilshoni. I will protect my soul by protecting my tongue. That's simple. He goes further. He says, for example, be careful of not making promises. Heke, haki, balash. And you make promises when you talk. That affects the person. Additionally, it says, make sure that when you recite the berachot, we learned this before Tu B'Shvat, make sure to pronounce the berachot properly. Not only don't skip a word, but don't even skip a letter. And also it says, be careful the way you eat, be careful the way you lay down, and even he says, be careful to the music that you listen to. It's a known fact. Music is the sound of the neshama. Who enjoys the music? The neshama. Yeah, we say the person, but who truly enjoys the music is for the neshama, like smell. Who benefits from the smell? Neshama. That's why you say Mosai Shabbat, Borei Meorei Ha'esh. How many times you get to hear a wonderful azan and you're in Atzilut? Keep singing, you're getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? And therefore it says, be careful the way you sleep, be careful how you lay down, be careful with your promises, make sure to recite berachot. The common denominator between all of the above is basically that it's all related to the communication, how a person speaks. And it says that a person should make this effort. Any day of the year, this effort is required. Believe me, it doesn't mean, between Parashat Shemot and Parashat Mishpatim, be super careful. Between Parashat Terumat Tetzaveh, Tilvezot HaBerakah, okay, no. The benefit that we have in these 6 weeks, which this year we get a bonus of 2 additional weeks, is we get amnesty. We go into the easy pass lane without having to pay a toll. That's the purpose of the whole period of the Shovavim. And since we were in Egypt and we left Egypt, we remove ourselves from the impurity that surrounded the Jewish people. Despite the fact that we survived Egypt and we had a couple of zechuyot, a couple of benefits, the way the Zohar Kadosh writes that there were 3 particular miracles that happened in Egypt concerning the Jewish people. Number 1, it says in Zohar Kadosh that no Jew became involved with a Goya. Lo ba'alu bat el nechal. Number 1. Number 2, husband and wife observed the laws of family purity. Obviously, perhaps without so many halachic details that we have today, that Chachamim through history built a couple of fences to protect the body, but they went to the mikveh. And number 3, that no one aborted the child, even though that there was the decree from Paro. Remember the beginning of Shemot? What's the common denominator between these 3 miracles that happened? The Berit Milah and family purity. That's it. This is the tikkun of this Berashiot. We're riding on the merit of our forefathers that they were able to survive in Egypt. And don't think that we are not living in Egypt today. We're living in Egypt, perhaps with technology available and different ways of living that compared to 3,000 years ago is like the Jetsons. Remember the Jetsons? I remember as a child being, flying. Remember that? Right? I said, I said, phone without wires. Wow. Today you have a phone in your watch, right? Mine is still the good old-fashioned way. I like it. I don't need too many gadgets. I got plenty. Believe me. Come to my office, you'll see a couple of them. All kosher, Baruch Hashem. Okay? So, Rabotai, we wish everybody to have a beautiful Shabbat Kodesh, Parashat Yitro. Yiratzon that Be'ezat Hashem will hear great news from Yeshaya Ben Lora, Be'ezat Hashem in the next few hours. And we say Tizkela Mitzvot to all the generous sponsors of today's class, and especially to Mr. and Mrs. Charlie's Gamal and family for the breakfast today as well. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I will see you Be'ezat Hashem a bit later. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ואמן. לפי חנניה ונקשי אומר רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך. תלווה להם תורה מצוות שנאמר